Ladies and gentlemen, when you were born, there was no guarantee that you'd live to see today. But here you are, and still you're waiting. Waiting for what? A better moment? A perfect time? Some miracle to push you forward? Wake up. You have slept long enough, not just in your bed, but in your being. Existing is not the same as living. Breathing, eating, going to work, this is survival. Living begins when you become conscious that you're alive. See, your body is temporary, but life is not just this flesh and bone. Life is a possibility, it is energy, it is awareness. If you sleep through it, what a tragedy it is. Not because someone else will miss your greatness, but because you miss the entire dance. Most people are trapped in cycles, work, distraction, sleep, repeat, and they call this a life. But cycles are for machines, not for human beings. A human being is meant to evolve, to expand, to touch the limitless. You don't need a new job or a new partner or a new place to live. You need to wake up to what you are. You are not your failures, you are not your past, you are not your past, you are not even your thoughts, these are waves, you are the ocean. But how can you know this if you're numb all the time? Numb with scrolling, numb with entertainment, numb with worries. It's like sitting in front of fire but covering your eyes and then saying, I feel no warmth. Right now, just this moment, you have everything you need to start living. But that shift won't happen outside. No one will come and ring a bell and say, now it's your time. You must ring that bell from within. A little awareness, a little stillness, a little honesty with yourself. And suddenly your life begins to breathe, real breath. Not just lungs inhaling, but your soul exhaling its fear. Don't confuse excitement with aliveness. Excitement is short-lived. Aliveness is a deep hum, a constant presence that keeps you rooted in now. When you're awake, the same sun that rose 1,000 times before now touches you. The wind doesn't just blow, it speaks. The people around you aren't obstacles or tools, they are mirrors. Life becomes a profound unfolding, not a task list to be checked. If you wait for perfect conditions, you will wait forever. The conditions are already perfect. Not because everything outside is how you want it, but because you are here, you are breathing, you are conscious. That's the only perfection needed. The only tragedy is to die without ever having lived. Not because death is the end, but because it would mean you wasted the beginning. So stop. Breathe, feel, wake up, not tomorrow, not when you're richer, not when the world claps for you, but now. Wake up and start living. Not for someone else, not to prove a point, but because life is too immense, too mysterious, too sacred to sleep through. Life is not a rehearsal, it is happening now. And yet most people drift through the moments as if time is a dress rehearsal for something more real that might begin later, someday, somehow. Forgetting that each breath they take is not a preview, but the actual play itself unfolding scene by scene without the option for a retake. And in this illusion of later, they waste the only real currency they have, which is this very moment. This precious now that slips away like sand through open fingers, unnoticed until it's too late and all that remains is the echo of things unsaid, undone, unfelt. You see, the tragedy is not that life is short, but that we think we have time. So we postpone our joy, we delay our dreams, we suppress our truth, and we live like immortals in planning, yet behave like sleepwalkers in practice. Going through the motions, while the fire inside flickers and the world around us moves with a rhythm we no longer hear. Because our senses are dulled by routine and our hearts silenced by fear. And we call this a being responsible or waiting for the right time, as if life will someday knock politely and say, I'm ready now, begin living. But life doesn't wait, it doesn't slow down, it doesn't pause for your indecision or self-doubt. It moves like a river and you can either step in and feel its flow or stand frozen on the banks watching everything you ever wanted rush past you. And the saddest part is that we carry within us such vast potential, such deep wisdom, such silent music, but we act like we are powerless, like we're waiting for permission to begin being who we already are, forgetting that no one is coming to light the lamp for us. It is we who must strike the matches. We who must… So stop saving your best self for a day that may never arrive. Stop rehearsing for a future that doesn't exist. Stop postponing laughter, delaying laugh, holding back your heart until conditions are perfect. Because perfection is a myth and waiting is a slow form of death. And the only thing that truly belongs to you is this breath, this step, this blink, this choice to awaken now. Not later, not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, but now. Because now is the only door that opens into life. You must understand that awareness is the beginning of freedom. That when you see how much you've been sleepwalking, something within you breaks, not in pain but in liberation. Because the illusion collapses and what's left is raw, real and alive. And in that moment you may feel grief for the time lost, but do not dwell there. For even that grief can become fuel, fire, urgency to live more fully, to show up more honestly, to love more courageously. Because you realize that your life is not a Sunday story, it is a right now miracle. Even the smallest act done in full awareness becomes sacred, whether it is sipping water or watching the sky or speaking a truth long held back. And the beauty of waking up is that everything begins to shine because your eyes open. And you no longer need to chase happiness or meaning like it's hiding somewhere outside you. Because suddenly you realize you're alive, not separate from it, not a spectator of it, but its very pulse, its breath, its presence in motion. So don't live this life like you're just practicing for the real thing. This is the real thing, messy, unpredictable, breathtaking in its imperfection. And every time you hesitate to live fully, you trade something priceless for something hollow, and while comfort may feel safe, it does not nourish the soul like truth does, like courage does, like presence does. And there will come a time when the question won't be how long you lived, but how deeply. And only you can answer that. Now is not too late, you are not too broken, the path is not too far, but the first step must be yours. Not in fear, but in fullness, not in waiting, but in walking, not in rehearsing, but in becoming. And the moment you realize that the stage was always yours, that the light has always been on you, that the lines are not written but meant to be spoken from your heart, you'll know the truth at last. Life is not a rehearsal, it is happening now, and the time to live is not someday but always now, now, now. And if you're reading this now, then you still have time not to change the past but to reclaim your presence, to stop merely existing and begin living, to turn the ordinary into sacred, the forgotten into meaningful, the routine into revelation, for it is never too late to breathe deeper. To love harder, to laugh louder, to cry honestly, to speak bravely, to walk gently, and to remember that most people may only exist, but you were born to live. Comfort is the enemy of awakening because while it lulls you with soft whispers of safety and sameness, it secretly chains your potential to the walls of routine, making you believe that peace means avoiding discomfort rather than moving through it. And in that false security, you begin to numb not just your pain, but also your passion, your purpose, your fire. And you stop asking the deeper questions. You stop taking the harder steps, you stop hearing the quiet truth calling from within. Because comfort wraps you like a warm blanket over closed eyes and says, sleep a little longer, dream a little safer, while the soul, restless, wild and eternal, wants nothing more than to wake. See, true growth begins where comfort ends, because only in the stretch, the ache, the unknown, does something deeper stir and rise, and while the mind may crave stability, the spirit craves expansion. Not by staying where it is warm and predictable, but by walking where your legs tremble and your voice shakes and your old self cracks to make room for the real you to emerge. And yet most people trade their aliveness for convenience, their freedom for familiarity, their truth for approval, not realizing that comfort zones are just cages without bars. We say we want awakening, we say we want truth, we say we want transformation, but we want it without pain, without friction, without surrender. And that is like wishing to swim without getting wet or fly without letting go of the ground. Because to awaken means to feel, to face, to fall apart if necessary, to shed the layers that no longer serve, and comfort doesn't allow that. Comfort says, oh, you're fine as you are, even when your inner being is screaming for more. Not more things, but more life. And it's not that comfort is evil, it has its place, it is needed in moments of rest and recovery. But the problem begins when you start to live there, when you build your identity around ease, when you measure your success by how little discomfort you face, because then you begin to shrink or to settle, to stop, and slowly the vastness within you turns silent and the light dims not because it went out, but because you stopped feeding it with courage. Awakening is not about becoming something new, but remembering what you already are beneath the noise. And that remembering hurts at first. It shatters illusions, it breaks patterns, it forces you to see what you've been running from. And that's why most people choose comfort, not because it fulfills them, but because it hides what they're afraid to confront. And yet all that avoidance becomes a weight, a quiet heaviness that grows with time until you either wake up through discomfort or sleep forever in it. You see, comfort may offer pleasure, but awakening offers meaning, and meaning cannot be downloaded. It must be discovered, and discovery always demands risk, presence, humility and pain, but oh, the beauty that blooms on the other side, the clarity, the liberation, the aliveness, it cannot be found in the arms of comfort, only in the fire of truth, where your masks burn and your soul breathes for the first time. And so the invitation is simple but not easy. To stop asking, how can I stay comfortable? And start asking, what is keeping me asleep? To stop chasing ease and start embracing truth. To stop clinging to the known and start trusting the unknown. Because nothing worth waking up to lives inside your comfort zone. And every great transformation begins with the moment of discomfort that you did not run from, but stepped into with trembling feet and open heart. Yeah, because comfort is the enemy of awakening, not by force but by seduction. It convinces you to stay small, stay safe, stay asleep, and only when you dare to walk beyond it, when you choose to feel, instead of numb, to rise instead of rest, to live instead of merely exist, will you truly awaken, not into a new world, but into the real one that was waiting for you all along. Behind the veil of comfort you finally dared to lift. Awareness is the first step toward transformation. Because nothing can change until it is seen, nothing can evolve until it is acknowledged, and nothing hidden in the shadows can ever be healed until the light of attention touches it. And yet most people try to change their lives by rearranging the surface, by altering the external, by forcing outcomes without ever looking inward, without pausing long enough to ask why they do what they do, think what they think, feel what they feel. Because true transformation is not about becoming someone else, but about remembering what has always been there beneath the noise, the wounds, the layers, and that remembering begins not with striving but with seeing. You cannot shift what you do not know, cannot release what you do not recognize, and cannot awaken if you keep walking through your days in unconscious repetition, acting out patterns inherited from the past, clinging to beliefs you never questioned, responding from wounds you never noticed, and calling it just the way you are. But the moment you become aware, not just mentally but viscerally, of how your mind functions, of how your fears color your choices, of how your energy moves, a crack appears in the structure, a doorway opens, and through that opening transformation begins to breathe. Awareness is not judgment, it is not self-criticism, it is not analysis for the sake of control, it is pure noticing, gentle observation, the courage to see what is without rushing to fix it, to simply be with your truth without denying it or decorating it. And in that sacred space of still witnessing, something begins to unravel, not in chaos but in clarity, and what was once tangled and tight begins to loosen, not because you pushed, but because you finally saw. And in that seeing, the old loses its power, the false begins to dissolve, and the unconscious becomes conscious, which is the essence of all transformation. Not adding more, but stripping away what never belonged to begin with, and that stripping happens effortlessly when awareness deepens, like darkness dissolving in the presence of light, like ice melting in the warmth of the sun, because awareness is not a tool. It is a force, a presence, a gateway through which all true change must pass. You can meditate, you can pray, you can read all the wisdom in the world, but if you are not aware of how you show up in this moment, how your breath flows, how your thoughts shape your reality, how your choices echo your past to reflect your presence, then transformation will remain a concept, a desire, a distant possibility rather than a living truth. And the most powerful transformations often begin not with action, but with attention, not with doing, but with simply being aware. And this awareness does not demand perfection, it asks only for honesty, not to impress others, not to appear spiritual, but to look into your own being and say, yes, this is me right now. Without defense, without distraction, and from that place of raw seeing, you stop reacting blindly, you stop blaming the world, you stop running from yourself, and in that stillness you begin to reclaim your power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to choose, to respond, to live in alignment with truth. So let your awareness become a daily practice, not something reserved for crises or silence, but something woven into your walk, your work, your relationships, so that each moment becomes a mirror and each experience a teacher. And through that practice, you begin to transform not in bursts but in quiet revolutions. Not by force, but by flow. As your being starts to realign with its essence, and the life you were meant to live begins to emerge naturally from the life you used to survive. Because awareness is the first step toward transformation, and also the second and the third, and perhaps the only step that truly matters. Because once you are aware, you are no longer asleep, and once you are no longer asleep, and once you are no longer live in denial, and once denial ends, truth begins. And truth, when lived fully, transforms not just what you do, but who you are. Only a conscious being can truly live, not merely survive, because survival is a biological function, an inherited instinct, something even animals do without thought or awareness. But to live, to truly live, requires presence, it requires depth, it requires the courage to be awake in a world that often rewards numbness and distraction. And while survival is reactive, living is responsive, not a reflex of fear, but a dance of freedom, a choice to step beyond the automatic and into the authentic. And that choice can only be made by a conscious being who has tasted the weight of sleepwalking and decided it is no longer enough. You see, most people spend their lives reacting to circumstances, reacting to expectations, reacting to wounds they never examined. And they call this life, but it is only a chain of habits repeated in slightly different form. Like walking through the same hallway with different paint on the walls, because without awareness, you are not choosing your life. You are simply repeating it, and repetition without consciousness may build survival, but it never leads to expansion, it never touches the sacred, it never allows you to experience the full spectrum of what it means to be human. To live consciously means to slow down enough to see, to feel, to notice, not just the world around you, but the world within you. The thoughts that rise, the emotions that guide, the beliefs that filter, the stories that shape your reality. And only when you become aware of those internal movements can you begin to question them, to dissolve what is false, to nurture what is true, and to move through life not as a victim of circumstance but as a participant in creation. Not just drifting from event to event, but walking with intention, with depth, with rootedness in your own. And it is this awareness that transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, that turns a breath into a prayer, a glance into connection, a moment into eternity. Because when you are conscious, you are no longer waiting for life to begin, you realize it is already happening now. And the secret is not found in grand achievements or distant futures, but in the quiet fullness of presence, in the space between your thoughts, in the silence beneath the noise, in the feeling of aliveness that can only be accessed when you are truly here. Survival fears stillness, for in stillness you begin to notice the patterns that bind you, the pain you've buried, the truth you've avoided, but living requires stillness. It is through stillness that clarity comes, through awareness that healing comes, through consciousness that transformation comes, formation comes. And while the unconscious mind clings to the familiar and calls it safe, the conscious soul seeks truth no matter the cost, because truth liberates, and only in liberation can one truly live. A conscious being does not escape discomfort but learns from it, does not run from fear but listens to it, does not chase meaning in the external but uncovers it within. And in that inward journey there is no map, no guarantee, and no applause. But there is freedom, there is alignment, there is peace. Because when you are conscious, you stop needing life to look a certain way and instead begin to meet life as it is, raw and beautiful and unpredictable, and in that meeting something deeper than comfort arises. It is called aliveness. And it is this aliveness that separates living from existing. For a conscious being may feel pain more deeply, but also joy more fully, may walk with uncertainty, but also with integrity, may lose things along the way but never loses themselves. Because when you are conscious, you remember who you are beyond the roles and names and stories. You remember that you are not here to merely survive, to accumulate, to impress, but to awaken, to express, to be, and in that being, you come alive in ways no survival strategy could ever offer. So if you have the weight of repetition, the dullness of routine, the ache of something missing even when everything seems in place, that is the call to wake up, to go inward, to become conscious. Only a conscious being can truly live, not merely survive. And the moment you realize this is the moment life begins to open, not because it changed, but because you did.